Okay, Oscar says, first of all, I want to congratulate the whole TrainerRoad team. I've been using it for more than 2 years and the improvements are amazing. The AI FTP detection is crazy. It just works perfect. And I've been more fit now and I have been more consistent since adaptive training arrived. Good to hear, Oscar. Way to go. It's exciting stuff. From Ivy, from community management to our customer support folks to all of our engineers and designers and our product managers. Thanks to all of you for all the great work you've done. You're helping Oscar get faster. Could help you too. Go to trainerroad.com, sign up, give it a shot. Okay, says, I got injured in September of last year, and now I'm on my highest FTP ever, and I feel great on and off the bike. Way to go. With those improvements, a question came to mind. I started strength training 3 times per week, full body, and he says 8 to 12 reps, 3 to 4 sets each exercise. So that's like not, that's pretty typical for what we would see for cyclists doing strength training, right, Chad? Mm-hmm. Yep. He says, this isn't the sort of strength training you're doing when you're trying to like boost like, 1 rep max and vanity stuff. The 8 to 12 isn't exactly going to accomplish that. Instead, it's going to make us strong, capable humans. That's what we're looking for. After my injury, he says, I have noticed that anaerobic workouts seem really easy now. And he mentions that he's on the specialty phase. So usually I rate them easy or moderate. And usually the jumps between the workouts are 0.8 to 1.2 on the progression levels. VO2 max are still hard, but not as hard as before. And threshold over-unders are still a nightmare for me. Hopefully last week's podcast can help with that. We talked about over-unders. I was wondering if there is a relationship between strength training and anaerobic workouts on the bike. Does strength training help to improve the side on the bike, or is there not a direct relationship between those? Again, you guys are amazing. So thank you, Oscar. And before we get into answering this one, I want to address one thing. First of all, because of his specialty phase, I bet that we're not trying to, so this is going to explain a bit of the inner workings behind how the plans work. Depending on the day that you have on your plan, there are different intentions with that specific day. Because you can swap the days around and move everything around. I'll just say like day 1, day 2, and day 1, day 2, and day 3 of a low volume plan. One might be a day in which we really want to improve your abilities. Another day might be one where we don't want to improve your abilities. And instead we just want to keep you, keep your stasis going. And then another one might be where we want to stretch your abilities and push you even further. Right. So it all depends. And as a result, sometimes you'll be doing anaerobic workouts. And in this case, like Oscar, you might be marking them easy. So you'd think that like, okay, well then why aren't I really moving up? Why isn't adaptive training going, okay, well in that case, boom, moving way up. Well, in the specialty phase, the goal isn't to really drive up your abilities so much as to make sure that you are refined and ready and able for your event when it comes. And that's probably why he's marking them easy. So anyways, that's how that works. Wanted to clarify that. And it's cool because now when you look at your training plan, you'll understand why some weeks you'll be like, I marked it easy or moderate. Why isn't it jumping me up even faster? Because maybe that's not a relatable objective for your goals. So, and adaptive training knows the difference. It's super smart. Okay. So Chad, there's kind of like this assumption here, or an assumption about this relationship of strength training helping these maybe higher VO2 and then up from there in intensity. So anaerobic and sprint efforts. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? Does strength training make those efforts better? And if so, how, or make you better at those efforts? And if so, what's actually going on that makes you better at those efforts?
I think it's just a matter of strength training making every effort better. It's just a little more evident when you're working as hard as you are when you're doing VO2 max and anaerobic work. So you just become a better rider. You just have a stronger body. You're hemorrhaging less energy movement because you become more refined. You're better at pushing on the pedals and not suffering power losses in other parts of the body that move because you don't push on the pedals very well or in a very controlled manner. I do think this is just one of the maybe not unintended, but less celebrated benefits of strength training is you just get better at stuff in general. You're just better at riding the bike. And again, it becomes more prevalent when you're doing things that are hard, when you're really taxing the muscular system as much as you can in an endurance sport, something that's more reliant on metabolic turnover and not so much muscular force capabilities. So the translation from strength training to the closest equivalent in endurance training, the anaerobic side or even the sprint side, is still not going to be as clear as people I think want to make it. If I can push a bunch of weight in the gym, I should be able to push the pedals harder. And yeah, to some degree that does carry, but we're still talking the difference between strength, which is force production, and endurance, which is energy turnover. That these things will never perfectly align or even very closely align. These are just benefits of strength training. And again, you see them because you're working hard, but you'll also see them if you back it off a bit and you have to ride for 5 hours when your longest ride used to be 3 hours, yet magically now you're getting through 5 hours without the same aches and pains, where you can work at threshold and do, a 40K time trial in 4 minutes less, and, maybe even at the same power, just because you're not wasting power in ways that manifest because your body just doesn't work as cohesively as it does when it's stronger.
Mm-hmm. Ivy, what do you feel in terms of like benefits on the bike when you are doing strength training?
Yeah. Man, I think about this all the time in the beginning of the season, when I first start integrating really hard efforts. And there's such a stark difference between when I didn't used to do strength training and would try to jump into those efforts and how horrible it felt the first, few weeks that I was doing them versus doing strength training now. And there's so much significance in familiarity for me, where, a lot of the lifts that I do at much higher reps, so like 15 or 20 in some cases, I feel a direct correlation when I'm doing like sprint efforts, for example, where I feel I'm more able to use more muscle recruitment of my entire body in the later part of those efforts because it feels so familiar from doing that weight training to that degree with higher reps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's this like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So it's not like those things that I'm doing make me, from a physiological standpoint, a better sprinter. I might be able to put out a little more power, but it just makes, I just feel like it helps me prepare to better know what it feels like and recruit my muscles in a different way when stuff gets harder, longer.
That kind of goes against like the bro science logical conclusion that we have in our minds, right, Hannah? Of like, well, if I lift muscles, if I lift weights, I get big muscles, and big muscles would help me really push down on those pedals hard, like Chad said. And it's really not about hypertrophy or like, increasing the amount of muscle mass in terms of, circumference of your biceps and your quadriceps. That's not really the goal, right, Hannah?
Right. And I think that should be really encouraging to people who haven't done a lot of strength training in the past, because I think it's something like the first 12 weeks of strength training is primarily neuromuscular gains. And I feel like those neuromuscular gains are what serve me the best on the bike, which is maybe also why, like Ivy said, when I first start strength training for the year, I'm like, whoa, look at this increase. And then, obviously you continue to have that and more, but it's just so noticeable when you first start. So yeah, I would second that. I feel this neuromuscular connection, like my body is doing what my mind asks me to do, which is also coordination. I feel more muscle fiber recruitment. And I just feel more durable, kind of like, which to me equates to efficiency, instead of power dissipating, maybe through some slight knee movements or upper body movements, I feel so much more stable. Like I can truly push. Every muscular effort is going straight into that pedal.
I'm feeling that even with doing more running now and swimming and everything else, just getting a stronger body. Cause man, I'm feeling planted on the bike, comfortable, like capable, stable. I don't feel like I'm wishy-washy. One thing that I noticed too is that when I've been doing strength training and really diligently, and if I start to taper off on that, I also taper off on this ability to be able to consciously and actively fire certain muscle groups or make them perform like I want. So glutes turning off is a really common thing. Like your glutes are not as involved in the pedal stroke as they should be. And then what happens is your quadriceps tend to take up the brunt of the work. And with us cyclists, typically our lateral quadriceps. So those outside quad muscles, they are the ones that end up taking the brunt of the work. That pulls on your knees a little weird. That creates this chain of instability that then causes a lot of problems, all because, you know, your glutes aren't firing very well. And it's because we sit down with them turned off and we don't really use them a whole lot. When you strength train and you're doing, you know, exercises that go on to TrainerRoad's blog, and you can find a ton of different resources, go onto our YouTube page, youtube.com/TrainerRoad, and you can see different strength training exercises that we recommend. When you do those, it forces you to fire those muscles. And when you do that, it builds those connections. So then when you're on the bike and you're like, hey, I'm not firing appropriately, you simply think of it and you start doing it, and it happens. Whereas sometimes if you aren't doing strength training, you have to get off the bike, do like, you know, glute activation exercises and try to do that stuff just to restore those connections. And then you hope it lasts on the bike. It's such a great insurance program for athletes to avoid injury and to be able to build proper technique. And sprinting really, you know, I don't know how to really measure this, but I think there's more to sprinting in terms of like coordination is more to blame for successful sprinting than just pure force creation. And I think that that's evident by the fact that rarely a sprint is won by the initial surge of power, but the athlete's ability to sustain that power, right? That's where you see athletes, and typically what it looks like is instead of an athlete sustaining it and accelerating away from the field, it's just everybody else can't sustain it quite as much. So they end up dropping back. It makes that rider look like they're accelerating ahead, but in many cases they don't. It's that ability to be able to fire the muscles all at the right pattern. Like Chad said, you have agonists and antagonists, and they're not fighting each other. Instead, they're working perfectly in unison. And when that happens, it's really efficient. You know, we had Justin Williams on the podcast, and what did he say about how he's so good at sprinting? Practice. He said that he has sprinted endless amounts of times his whole life. That's just what he has done all the time. And you look at Corey and you look at Justin and how good they are at sprinting, probably a brotherly rivalry of sprinting against each other all the time, doing stuff, you know, and that's the sort of thing that really builds that ability to go fast on the bike. So Oscar, on those efforts, those require a huge amount of neuromuscular coordination. The higher in intensity you go, or the longer things get drawn out, the more important that becomes. So that's likely why you're seeing the most benefit there. It probably comes down to coordination rather than just building big muscles. So kind of a sneaky gain that you're getting from strength training.
It could also be a sign of needing to work on that threshold and below a little bit more. Just, it makes me think and be curious what Oscar's cadence is for some of those efforts. You know, if he's standing for all of his anaerobic work or doing a really low cadence, that makes it more muscular, versus then if he sits and spins at 90 RPMs during the threshold, it's a very different type of effort and requires more cardiovascular load. So it's just different, and it's not good, not bad. It's just a data point to know, okay, these are my areas of opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point. Looking like everything feels really easy here, maybe the negative space speaks more volumes, right? So, and honestly, the one thing I can say is with strength training, that's one of the most immediate ways that I recognize the improvement is in sweet spot and sustained work. And I think it comes down to, once again, that efficiency. Like I'm not flopping around, you know, it's just easier to be able to sustain that. Like one way I always think of this too is if you're riding at VO2 max and your pedaling technique changes substantially when you're at VO2 max versus when you're at threshold, it's probably not sustainable from many different reasons. But even if we want to isolate one reason, it's because you're not pedaling efficiently when you get up to VO2 max, right? If you're just flopping your body around and you're pedaling with your ears instead of just in from a solid foundation, pelvis anchored or the sit bones anchored to the saddle, and you're able to produce that power, well, of course you wouldn't be able to sustain that for long periods of time, right? And the same thing goes with threshold. So check your technique on that for sure. That's a great point, Hannah. Chances are you have the strength to be able to do it, but sometimes we lack the discipline to be able to sustain and actually utilize all that strength. So Any other points you want to cover on this one, y'all? Cool.
So
We're going to get into.
You.
Yeah. Way to go, Ivy. Yes. It's good for you. Yeah. Ivy, do you have any other races planned coming up soon? Or do you want a sneaky race again? Because you totally sneaky raced that criterium this past weekend.
Yeah, I didn't know if I wanted to race. We talked about early season races pretty recently on a podcast and how I usually don't do them because of how emotionally damning they are for me to just get rolled. I wasn't planning on racing, but this race in Sacramento is kind of a NorCal classic and training's been going good and I was feeling snappy. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And
what'd you learn? Because you won, which by the way, awesome. Way to go, Ivy. Everyone in the podcast world is clapping for you right now.
Are we talking about Land Park?
Yeah.
One of our favorite courses. Chad, I bet Chad, do you like that course as well? I've never really.
It's a power course. Yeah, it's not very technical.
Yeah, it's fun, huh? And there's a lot of different tactics that can unfold on it because it has a few different like key elements that really change it up. What did you learn, Ivy? Or what did you enjoy?
A lot actually. Which is that it doesn't matter that I've been removed from actual crit racing for like 3 or 4 years or more, that I'm just getting smarter as I get older. I feel like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, if I would roll up to a crit like that, especially in this time of training, I would have tried to force a break. I would have gone for like every preem and would have gotten rolled in the end for sure. And so I'm stoked that I was able to kind of roll the dice a few times and see where I was at and see where everyone else was at and what kind of course it was and if it was a breakaway course and what I could do and actually look at it and critically think about it in the race and respond accordingly.
What was the strategy, Ivy? What ended up working?
So because I'm so out of practice with crits and I didn't know how my legs were and I didn't know any of these people I was racing with, I was like, okay, I'm going to get first preem just to see how my legs are and remind myself who I am. And there was one on the first lap. So that was great. And it went great. And so I was like, okay, it's good. It's a good day. And it was super windy. And the course is pretty open with the exception of like a tricky little chicane. So I was like, okay, this could potentially be a breakaway course. And everyone was super willing to attack a lot and try to force a break. And so I was like, okay, it could happen. And there are a few teams with a couple riders. So it's not unlikely by any means. So I followed a few and kind of bridged up to a couple in the first, I don't know, like 5 or 6 laps, and it just wasn't working. And it was so windy. And the field was too motivated to not let anything go that they didn't like. So it just wasn't going to work. So then my strategy had to just be to figure out who the sprinters were, kind of like sit back and watch them go for preems and figure out where to be in the end and just be patient.
Nice. Way to go. Those mid-race strategy course corrections are kind of tough to do sometimes, right? Because we get married to an idea of how a race is going to play out. And it's tricky to like sit back and say, actually, I'm going to observe what's going on and change that.
Yeah, good on you for seeing that early on. And just, I'm guessing, so for the middle part of the race, you sat in and played it a little more conservatively.
Totally.
Yeah. And then it came down to a bunch sprint, field sprint. Yeah.
And that was so tricky and so hairy because of how windy it was. And being a little out of practice, and maybe you should have been a little bit farther back. When it's super windy, you can make the mistake of, and I did, thinking I needed to be like second or third or fourth wheel, expecting it to be like a traditional sprint where people in front will really wind it up and carry a lot of speed and I'll be able to pop around them. But because it was so windy, they lost so much speed and we all got swarmed. And all of a sudden there were like 4 or 5 riders to the left in the draft, like that had already passed me. And I was like, whoops, well, here we go. And just kind of had to weave through them and really wind it up and somehow got past them. Yeah.
Just superior power then. You didn't even latch onto them. You just sprinted against them and beat a train of 4.
yeah, I had to just like kind of
Way to go.
sneak through them and
Awesome.
try to find another gear, and somehow did. Yeah.
I know this doesn't matter at all, and I know that you weren't going for this, but I saw a picture of you on the race. Everyone should go follow Ivy on Instagram, by the way. Go check that out. I think it was on your Instagram. Maybe it was on your stories. You just look like a bike racer. Like, it's so cool. Like, when I look at myself in a bike race, I don't always think like, yeah, that looks like a bike racer. But like every photo I see of Ivy racing, I'm like, dang, like that looks cool. Like, yeah, it was just awesome. There's a picture of you like going through a turn and then like riders behind you, and it just looks, it
Okay,
looked
that's
awesome.
on the main right now.
So,
yeah.
yeah, that was
Thanks,
super
John.
cool.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So like companies, if you're looking for models to make your stuff look like real cyclists are using it, Ivy looks like is the most real of real cyclists. It's pretty cool. So
Thank you.
Ivy, sorry if I just pitched you for modeling gigs that you absolutely do not want.
That's okay.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.